Namaste. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my NPTEL course on interior design. The entire week, we had very crucial discussions because we were focusing on different materials. And the knowledge and application of materials is very important for, a discipline and industry like interior design. So I'm trying to summarize all the discussions that we had so far, concentrating on different kinds of materials. And I'll do it in a very overview manner since we already had elaborate discussions. So we talked about timber, then we talked about stone, tiles, and paints. And we talked about a lot of variations within these. And we saw some applications, technical specifications, construction details, laying methods, some case studies. So, all of that I am just trying to give an overview of along with some references. So let's begin the summary focusing on materials, and I'm just starting with timber. And first of all, we try to understand the anatomy of wood. And, even before trying to understand commercially timber as a material or its applications or byproducts, we first try to understand what is the anatomy of wood, what is heartwood, what is sapwood, how does the cross section of a tree trunk look like, and then what is hardwood, what is softwood, what is the difference when we try to understand their making and their anatomy, because hardwoods and softwoods have some differences, of course. And then also continuing with this, we try to understand on what the finish of wood actually depends on. So, what is the type of the timber? What is the quality? Which portion? Like we were talking about the heartwood and sapwood, and which portion of the tree does it come from? The type of cuts we employ as part of our design and execution, different kinds of sections of those cuts, and if there are some anatomical peculiarities like knots and veins and other aspects, when we look through this lens and zoom in and look at the timber. It's a very fascinating way of understanding material, rather than just trying to see its mechanical properties or physical properties or chemical properties, just looking at it anatomically, just like we see human body, in terms of its anatomy and what are the varied components, what are the sections like, how all the parts come together, how the body functions. So, interior architecture does offer these fascinating opportunities, trying to have these transdisciplinary, inquiries, and then trying to understand what are the direct implications on interior design or interior spaces. So, we have to understand, of course, the properties also, which will help us decide what kind of timber to choose and where its performance gets impacted because of, certain property related important aspects. So, whether there is a presence of certain chemicals, just like the aliphatic compounds or resinous substances in that wood, and what are the environmental conditions where these woods grow, from where are we procuring them, are they seasoned well, is there moisture content within it, have we dried it well, and then what is the texture like, what kind of feel or tactility or texture is required for our project, and hence we go with that selection. Also, the kind of grain and pattern that would give a certain appearance or look or aesthetic aspect, to the project or the product where they are utilized. And also, what is the economics behind procuring and applying that timber, or including the maintenance and operational aspects. And then what is the time available for processing? What are the stages of processing that have been incorporated? And what are the tools and technology that are available while working on these different kinds of woods? And what are we specifically employing for the projects that we are working on as designers? what is the age of the wood that we are using for the project? Too old, too young? And then how does it impact on the appearance and the performance of timber? Moisture content, I was talking about seasoning. And then what is the intended use for which we are using it? And hence, how do I decide whether I use a softwood or a hardwood? Even within that, which softwood or which hardwood of what kind am I using for, interior portion or exterior portion, for structure or for furniture and so on. So these are some images that show the different kinds of grains and patterns that one comes across looking at this plethora of types of woods which are available. And we could use them also as part of design vocabulary. And it's also important to understand the technical aspects, which we tried to do when we focused on the lecture, where we extensively talked about the woods. There are different types of colors, in which we could uh, find woods. And there is this natural color palette that a designer could achieve merely by selecting, the kinds of woods, because they come in this variety and it's so diverse. So we see over here, of course, there is a because of the screen and because of the digital translation, there may be slight deviation from the original color pigment. And of course, within these also, since it's a natural timber, there may be variations within each batch also, but largely representative of what these timbers showcase in terms of color. This is what we see. So there is birch, there is maple, and then within these also sometimes there is, like, variety. There is yellow birch, there may be white birch, and then cherries, this reddish tint. We have this ebony, cocoa, and mahogany. So some lighter shades to some darker shades, and some shades like this. One can just pick and choose. We try to understand types of wood also. So there are soft woods, just as cedar, fir, pine. There are also hardwoods like ash, birch, cherry, mahogany, and then also teak and walnut, walnut being like one of the hardest woods. We also saw byproducts of the timber industry. And we talked about plywood, veneer, laminate, lumber, and MDF. We talked about all of these and why are they used these days, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of each kind of timber and all of that. So this was like an overview, and of course, it will come only after a lot of experience in working on site and touching the material, using it, trying to learn through the method of cutting, whether you want to cut along the grain or across the grain. So, along is always more advisable to maintain strength. So, all of these, theoretically speaking, give us some awareness, but there has to be a practical understanding which will help us understand these materials much better. And then we can utilize them to their full potential and execute them in the best way possible. We also try to understand the price range in which these timbers come, and within that also some local timbers available in India, and then some imported timbers, and then what are the different kinds of prices and per meter cube, and we tried to have a little understanding on that. Then we had a lot of discussion on stone, which is a very, very widely used material in most of the projects. And we saw some case studies. So there was this stone house in Rajasthan that we discussed very extensively. And what we discussed in terms of the origin of stone, the types of stone, certain properties, certain historical ways in which stone has been used. We expanded on that later, and some of those dimensions of utilizing stone as a construction material within interior architecture industry We could definitely have a deeper understanding of that through case studies that we had seen. So, this was a studio exercise, and we discussed this house. We started with the layout and, all the details from procuring stone, and then, the kind of opening details, chimney details, flooring, etc. And, we saw some sections also. So, there was this comprehensive inventory that was created on that project, which was discussed in detail. We also saw this very interesting project, Krushi Bhavan Orissa, and you will see it repeated a few times during my discussions. I like it very much, focusing on different aspects of interior design. This is done by Studio Lotus, and we tried to understand the usage of stone, the local stones available in Orissa, Kondalite, and what are the specific unique details of this project. How did they create an ecosystem by incorporating and involving different stakeholders, including the artisans, makers, and craftspersons, customized finishes, textures, and very interesting facade, which is inspired from the famous Ikat weave that we see in the region. So, respecting the culture and the identity of that part of the country and then reflecting it through the built form. We saw some very experimental explorations focusing on stone as a material. These were findings from a workshop that was conducted at CEPT. I was a part of organizing team as well as a participant when this was done. And this was very interesting. So, getting inspired from the human spinal cord and then trying to understand how the interlocking and joinery happens between these different parts. And then if we sort of use stone, the leftover pieces of stone from the industry and capitalizing on the attribute of modularity, if we use this human anatomy and interlocking system and then try to translate it uh, to these modular pieces of stone and try to design some kind of a system where through permutation and combination of these modules and different arrangements we could achieve space making elements or different functions within an interior architecture project. It could be a sculptural element, it could be a shelving or storage system, maybe a partitioning system, even a parapet. So, also, we focused on the kind of joinery that was required, and while working on ground with industry, when this prototype was produced on human scale, what were some iterations and revisions we had to do, keeping in mind the weight of the stone and also the concerns regarding, its longevity and that the joinery doesn't fall apart and so on. So this was very, very interesting. This is another exploration that we saw in stone from the same workshop. And here we were trying to create a non-linear surface, very interesting, quite aesthetic, very fluid and curved. And, also utilizing techniques like inlay and this natural contrast achieved through different kinds of stones and then achieving that color contrast and putting the pieces together to also get an impression of this tree over here that we see, the tree of life. And then what was the joinery like, the first course, how it was placed, and on that the second course, what is this interlocking joinery that we see. So it's like an entire portfolio with all the working drawings and the idea and the initial impression along with the joinery details, and again trying to utilize the idea of circularity and recycling, reuse, along with attributes of modularity, portability, foldability. These were some of the kinds of keywords which were put together for this workshop and a very, very enriching training session. So that was an interesting prototype. This one was also produced, and we saw the details of this prototype as well. So in production, of course, we saw one arrangement, but there is a possibility of permutation and combination and rearranging these modules and then reassigning a function altogether. So continuing in the same spirit and the same brief that we saw, the last two slides. This is something that was done, very, very interesting. Here also some details like inlay were introduced, and this was done with the craftspersons, again celebrating this ecosystem of bringing diverse stakeholders together who know the material like the back of their hand, and then they try to do something very interesting and experimental out of it. This is again from that workshop, and this was also interesting. So there was one module 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then the different assembly, and then trying to create interesting uses, one of which were like, the partition screens and different configurations of that. This was another interesting case study where stone was extensively explored and utilized, keeping in mind the idea of modularity. This is from the Indo-German project done by IIT Roorkee and RWTH Aachen University in Germany. And this one particular essay was developed by Prashant, who is a PhD scholar with us, and we also developed the human scale prototype out of it, so which was properly fabricated. So there were these pieces of stones again, and these are the metal sections and how the joinery was designed to put together these sections, and then a permutation and combination of these modules was used to create enclosures and different kinds of prototypes on a human scale. Then we talked about tiles. Tiles are very, very important materials used extensively in interior design industry and all kinds of projects to achieve all kinds of scales and spaces. So we started to understand what are the different kinds of tiles which are available in the market, what kind of treatment we give to those tiles, and then how do we use them for covering roofs, floors, walls, showers, tabletops, etc. Then we also saw some considerations for the flooring tiles. What is abrasion resistance? How do we achieve balanced cuts? What is spacer? What is grout? How do we lay the tiles? And we had a lot of discussion on this. How do we make a drawing, to install tiles? And how do we take care of any faucet openings or any kind of already existing details because of which we need to cut the tiles? And again, what is a squeegee and what are the tools and everything. Then the most common tile installation designs also we came across. Parallel installation, the diagonal one, very beautiful herringbone pattern, and some other ways of doing with an inset tile. We also saw these very interesting technical specifications. This is a tile company, and this is for flooring tiles. And the inventories and charts and catalogs like these help us understand how there are certain details that are industry preferred, and how we can be industry ready while we are working with these materials on with these kinds of details. So the entire system in place, starting with the name of the tile, the size in inches, number of tiles which are required, its usage, additional remarks, also with the material cost per square feet. So this is sort of a matrix that helps us. It's a complete catalog in that sense. Then we moved on to understand paints, which is also a very, very important material in the entire interior design industry gamut. We tried to understand the paint industry scenario, like the overall picture in India. We started with some popular brands, the ones are listed over here. And then we took like one case study specifically, and through Asian paints, we tried to understand the details about paints and finishes and textures. So, what are exterior textures and how can they help an architect and how they can benefit a client? And there is this possibility of achieving a very unique premium look in our interior spaces through these textures and finishes, and how we can use them, for our advantage to enhance spaces and create a very nice design vocabulary. All that we tried to understand, and we had elaborate discussion on that. And how do the clients get benefited from these textures, and not just providing unique appearance or hiding surface undulations, they also provide added protection from weathering, and then add life to your finishes. And then, in terms of understanding the market, and through this case study of Asian paints, we understood also what are the different kinds of texture ranges possible, how they are applied, what is the technique and skill which is required or employed to apply. And there are like different kinds of patterns which are available. And of course, they keep doing a lot of research, and there may be more ranges and more designs and patterns added to what you are seeing on the screen. But to understand the overview, and then continuing with the same case study again, what is the process of application? Why is a top coat used? How does it help us in protecting from fungi and algae? And all of that we try to understand in detail, and very very interesting and useful sets of information like this. So which kind of texture is applied through which tool, and what is the film thickness, starting with thin to high film to a very thin film. What are the different kinds of finishes that you could achieve in that process of applying it through different tools and in different customized ways also. Of course, they come in a very, very defined pattern, but they could be customized. And the entire industry, again, starting with the interior paints to exterior, and then how these finishes are also available in, wood and enamel, not just for our wall surfaces. What is polyurethane? What is melamine? Also, I added UV to that. So all of these finishes, paints and textures, we try to have a range of these, some of the products which are available in the market, and how can we use them for our advantage. Some of the products which may not be best recommended as responsible designers, if the client is not too particular about budget and has some money to spare. And we talked a bit about how to make these finishes healthy, and having less organic compounds, volatile organic compounds, and why they are so important for visual aesthetics as well as well-being of the user. So we had a discussion on that, and also some discussion on tools for visualization, software simulations available as aids to us. How can we help our clientele perceive and understand our concepts and designs because of these renders and software simulations. In fact, there are also like live storerooms where one could go and see the mixing of colors, and how the entire paint process is done and what is the science behind it. So there are visualizing tools available, and what are these different tools that come handy for an interior designer? They could also be explored extensively. So we are going to focus now on green interiors, which is a very, very, very interesting subject, very crucial. And we will focus a bit on rating systems. We'll see some examples. And within this, entire sort of protocols or methods in which the rating is done, and the interiors are designated as green, there is a very important role of materials and finishes, which we just saw throughout the week, and we try to understand the peculiar specifications and technical details and properties associated with these materials. Some of the references that I have tried to put together. Thank you. I'll see you next time.